thank you to Jeremy and Mark for all your help in planning this. I don't know if you're here, but also to and just all the friends whose conversations helped spark this. People like Joelle, Robbie, Marco, many others. But most of all, thank you to Dr. Kaethler for taking a Friday night to do this for us. Before we get started and before I introduce him, this will be very brief, but I just want to give you 2 reasons why I care so much about this to maybe, hopefully, convince you why you should also care. The first one is pretty obvious. It's about marriage. This lecture will really explain why this is so important, but I think, just to put it out there, that I think we really tragically undervalue it and don't understand it. And I think a lot of the brokenness that's in the world starts with brokenness in the family. And it's hard to counter that if we don't understand what it is supposed to be. So Dr. Kaethler will be enlightening us tonight. The other reason I would argue is even more important than that, though. I think, basically, this whole thing sparked from a class I took with Dr. Kaethler called Theology of the Body. This is derived from a book called Theology of the Body by John Paul II. And it speaks to marriage. That is one of the predominant themes to it. But I think what it does most powerfully is presents a framework for how we see everything. Not just marriage, but ourselves, God, the world, all of reality. And I think, just to very briefly go into it, I think Christianity today has unknowingly adopted a post-Enlightenment way of thinking. For those of you who don't know what that means, essentially the Enlightenment kind of shifted our focus to the only things that are real are the things that we can see and measure. And it kind of separated the physical from the spiritual. And as Christians, obviously, we care about the spiritual too. But I think maybe we don't realize just how much we have separated the two and just how devastating the implications of that are. So this lecture, this topic really, I think, unites the two in a beautiful way, and it just gives a snapshot of the depth that we're missing when we do separate them. So just keep that in the back of your minds, that even if you never want to get married, this could still be important to you. But yeah, I would like to introduce Dr. Andrew Kaethler, who is our speaker for tonight. He is the academic dean at Catholic Pacific College and associate professor of theology. And he's an incredible professor who is not just a good teacher, but cares so deeply about the formation of his students and is so selfless with his time to do this event, to answer all your questions that are very unrelated to the class content. And is just overall a wonderful guy. So welcome, Dr. Kaethler.
Thank you, Emma. It's a great privilege to be here tonight, and a pleasure. What else is there to do on a Friday night, right? So my kids are all eating pizza, but we're talking about marriage. So and also to Mark and Jeremy and everybody and Ed for making this possible. As Emma said, this whole talk is going to be based around John Paul II's Theology of the Body. And it's a book called Man and Woman, He Created Them, A Theology of the Body. It's very dense read. And I'm hoping I can distill some of it tonight. It's hard to break it down. That's why we have a whole course, I should say, on the topic. For tonight's talk, I won't refer to the book because it's got a long title. I will refer to it as TOB if I'm referring to the book. And when I refer to John Paul II, we'll just call him JP2. A little easier, all right? Also say that it's a fun course to teach because it goes into pretty interesting topics like sex, verb and noun. And I swear every time that someone from Trinity Western, an admin person, comes over and walks by the classroom, I'm just so happening to talk about sex. I'm thinking, oh my, what are they going to think about our little college across the Little River? But so far, everything is good. Okay, well, let me begin with my prologue. And you should always be worried when the speaker has a prologue, because it's not even my introduction. But sorry about that. Okay, so TOB is centered around Jesus' dialogue, I'll put this over here, with the Pharisees in chapter 19 of Matthew's Gospel. And this just sets the tone for everything. So let's turn to Matthew chapter 19 and give it a read. Some Pharisees came to him to test him, and they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause?" He answered, "Have you not read that the one who made them at the beginning made them female and male? And said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." They said to him, "Why then did Moses command us to give a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her?" He said to them, "It was because you were so hard-hearted that Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so." Now, like many passages in Scripture, we get used to them and we often don't see the profundity in them. Well, John Paul II decided to spend a few years unpacking this and then making an enormous book. So, this passage is central to TOB for a number of reasons. So first, it sets out the authority for TOB, namely Jesus Christ. Pretty great authority. The Torah, let me just step back here a second. Jesus takes up the words of the Torah, specifically Genesis, and gives them authority. Interestingly, Joseph Ratzinger states that Jesus is the mysterium of the Torah, since in the final analysis, Jesus is the meaning of all the words of Scripture. The Pharisees, like Jesus, are engaging with the Torah, but they're bending it to their own brokenness. Jesus gives it its true meaning. Ratzinger writes, "The Torah," that's a quote you have up there, "the Torah is replaced by the Gospels, which alone can open up the meaning of the Torah. Moses, says Christ, wrote of me. The shrine of the Word, the Ark of the Covenant, now becomes the throne of the Gospel. The Gospel does not, of course, abolish the Scriptures or push them to one side. Rather, it interprets them, so that henceforth and forever they form the Scriptures of Christians, without which the Gospel would have no foundation." To put it simply, God himself, as the God-man Jesus Christ, sets before us the significance of the text. The Logos. In the beginning was the Word, okay? In the beginning was the Logos, if you don't know what I'm talking about. So when we talk about Logos, we're talking about Jesus Christ. The Logos, through whom all things are created, tells us the meaning of Genesis. Secondly, this passage provides the metaphysical structure for TOB. Jesus moves beyond the casuistry, sort of the clever but unsound reasoning of the Pharisees, and beyond man-made law, to the nature of marriage itself, to the metaphysics of marriage and of the human person in the beginning. Now, let's pause here to define a few terms. Metaphysics, what are we talking about? Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that concerns the first principles of things, the initial conditions of existence. Ontology, another fancy word, often seen as a branch of metaphysics, but in its oldest use is actually synonymous. It's the same thing as metaphysics. It concerns the nature of being, hence the relation to metaphysics. It concerns the very basis of reality. Applying this to marriage, JP2 is asking, what at the deepest level is the basis of marriage? What does it mean to speak of a human person? What is a person? What do we mean by male and female? And these questions are not concerned with how contemporary notions and customs portray these concepts. Metaphysics seeks to get the ultimate reality of them, the reality that lies behind customs and traditions. Or to put it differently, metaphysics claims that there is something behind our customs and our traditions. That these are not just random practices that develop out of thin air. Nor is marriage a merely human evolutionary development, which developed to further the growth of the human species. Certain evolutionary anthropologists and sociologists claim that in order to avoid sexually transmitted diseases, which inhibited childbirth, marriage was imposed upon the natural and instinctual polyamorous practices of early man. Now, JP2 would not deny that there are natural repercussions to marriage, but he would reject this simple biological reduction, and we should too. Now, today, a debate rages between essentialism and anti-essentialism. Some more big terms for you. Essentialism, or essentialists, effectively is the position JP2 is taking up, that the Christian tradition takes up, claim that we can know something of what it is to be human. In philosophical prose, we would say that essence precedes existence. There's a way in which I exist, which is set out. To put this in practical terms, when a builder builds a house, he does not simply gather a bunch of random material and hammer and bang things into random place. Rather, he has a plan, architectural drawings that provide the basis for all the various products to be formed into a house. If someone decides then to use the house as a skating rink or as a cattle barn, the house will end up being destroyed. Following from this, from essence precedes existence, we can say that there are practices that fulfill what it is to be a human person, and practices that mysteriously void our humanity. To murder someone is to do something that robs the murderer of his own humanity. In fact, we could say all vice strips away at our humanity. We say things like Adolf Hitler lost his humanity. It's a really strange thing, right? Because we can't say that about, we don't say lions lose their lionness or dogs lose their dogginess. I won't speak about cats. I guess lions are big cats. I don't like cats. I like lions. Now, anti-essentialism, on the other hand, claims that there's nothing that is essentially human. So here, take those philosophical words, existence now precedes essence. I define my essence. Essence is that which each person defines and creates for themselves. From this perspective, there's no such thing as woman. There's no such thing as man. These are mere social constructions. There is no isness. There's only infinite number of subjectivities. A little side note. If existence precedes essence, then nothing can be funny. If there is no isness, nothing is counter to reality. Humor is based upon things that do not fit, and thereby assumes that there are things that do fit. We laugh, for example, at a bodybuilder wearing a tutu, or a chimpanzee sitting in front of a computer. Why? Because in both cases, these activities do not fit with the essence of the thing, the bodybuilder or the chimpanzee. Okay, and the third important thing that we get from this passage. This passage opens up room for a depth of interpretation. By recognizing the metaphysical significance of Genesis 1 and 2, JP2 can begin to logically, theologically, unpack the depth and significance of these books, which Jesus quotes from in response to the Pharisees. That is, Genesis is to be read beyond the mere literal sense. Okay, now that's the prologue. Now it's warming up, right? Now you get the introduction. All right. Whew. So, the front matters out of the way. So let me introduce what exactly I'll be talking about tonight. If all goes well, God willing, My presentation will answer the following questions. Is marriage a cultural construct? I've already kind of answered that one. What does marriage have to do with reality? What does marriage have to do with faith? What does it have to do with me? And each one of you. In order to answer these questions, I will put forth that a person is one in relation. Academics, we love things in Latin because it makes us sound really intelligent. But there's something about some of these Latin words, they just sound so good. Communio personarum. Doesn't that sound nice? Okay, so a person in relation. Marriage is a form of living out this human reality, which is an icon of the Holy Trinity. And lastly, I will suggest that sex, both noun and verb, is a participation in the metaphysics of reality. With both overarching claims, you'll see that marriage is a prophetic reality and a continuation of creation. And to make these claims, I'm going to look at a number of notions put forth by JP2. I'll look at original innocence, and I'll explain these, original unity, and the spousal meaning of the body. Now, to put this in context, what I'm saying tonight about the nuptial relationality of reality, that's a mouthful, is a deeply countercultural claim. In fact, I would say it's the antithesis to the sin of the age. This sin is summed up in Genesis when Cain says to God, rhetorically, "Am I my brother's keeper?" It is the sin of autonomy, of individualism. It is masked as freedom and choice, but it's not. It is the state of existence that most closely matches that, the devil. Individualism is a schism of the human race and a schism within the church, the very reality that gives history and meaning to humanity. Individualism is the denial of the body. Individualism is the original sin, and it has led to all the brokenness that marks history. Redemption, then, is the overcoming of autonomous individualism, and marriage can and should participate in this act of redemption. Okay. Now, when I say it's overcoming, redemption's overcoming this individualism, I'm not just speaking this way, right? I'm talking about the relation with the divine other, with God himself, and each other. So, marriage matters. Marriage is not an institution that exists to make sex licit, legal, morally acceptable for Christians. Marriage and its concomitant sex are key to salvation history, key to making sense of reality in its deepest sense. Let's see if I can convince you of that. Okay. Am I doing okay with the slides? I always miss them. I always get behind in class. It's terrible. JP2's concept of original innocence is really helpful for tonight's topic. Original innocence, it's kind of self-explanatory, is a state of man before the fall. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil stands as a demarcating line between integral nature, pre-fall, and fallen nature, post-fall. Christ's appeal to the beginning in chapter 19 is an appeal that goes behind Moses' compromise to man's state of original innocence in the Garden of Eden. So it goes back to this original innocence. JP2 writes, "This means," do I have that up there? Yes. "This means that this order has not lost its force, although man has lost his primeval innocence. The integral nature of pre-fallen man continues to whisper to us." I think JP2 uses the language, you can still smell the scent of the garden. Christ draws his normative conclusions, the ethical standard for marriage, not from the fallen state, but from the state of original innocence. Whereas the Pharisees were drawing their conclusions from the present state of our brokenness, of our fallenness. And thus, as Jesus makes clear by returning to Genesis, marriage is not to be understood as an institution that was established as a compromise to our sinfulness. Genesis is not also, we want to say this, it's not simply a wonderful old myth that reminds us of the one provable dogma, as Chesterton says, of original sin. Rather, the creation story in Genesis, in all its facets, has meaning and import for the present. God's intentions set out in creation were not completely wiped out by the fall. The dimensions demarcated by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the state of innocence and the state of fallenness, don't simply mark a point in time. To read Genesis in this manner is to imprison it within time and to lock away its meaning. Rather, the tree of knowledge of good and evil is a line that runs through all of us in our innermost being. Alexander Solzhenitsyn famously wrote, "The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart and through all human hearts. This line shifts. Inside us, it oscillates with the years, and even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained." There's a link between these states, this pre-fallen state, original innocence, and our broken state, which enables us to find a line of continuity. Historical man, you and me, and our state of sinfulness cannot be understood apart from our state of original innocence. Jesus Christ appeals to original innocence, the prehistoric state of man. And he uses this to speak about the contemporary situation, not to speak about a lost dream. We could say that fallenness always carries within it a reference to the grace of original innocence. JP2 writes, "In every man, without exception," and by the way, when he's using man, it's the German sense, man and woman, okay? "In every man, without exception, this state, the historical state, plunges its roots deeply into his theological prehistory, which is the state of original innocence. Historical man is not left alone in his sin. He participates in both the history of human sinfulness, unfortunately, and in the history of salvation. He is both subject to what came before him, and he's co-creator. He's open to redemption, and redemption includes the redemption of the body." And JP2 turns to Romans. "We ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for the redemption of our bodies." And it is the redemption of the body which provides the line of continuity between man's state of sin and his original innocence. So, to reiterate, note that it's not brokenness that makes sense of our condition, or who we are, how we're meant to live. We must understand a straight line before we can recognize a crooked line. Sin is not the first word, nor is it a word that can make sense of anything if it's not first understood in terms of love. It is only God's love that can make sense of reality. Likewise, it is original innocence that sets the framework for marriage. Okay, that's original innocence. So, let's go to the next phrase, original unity. "Therefore a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh." JP2 draws our attention to Genesis 2:21-22 to explain the notion of original unity. "So the Lord caused torpor," which is, he says, is a state of unconsciousness, "to fall upon the man who fell asleep. Then he took one of his ribs and closed the flesh again in its place. With the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he formed a woman." Okay, now, kind of define torpor, but is there something deeper that's going on when we talk about this word torpor? Why does Scripture give us this image, man falling into this torpor? JP2 says, I think it's really fascinating. He says, this torpor is a type of return to non-being, so that man will re-emerge, when he's awoken, as a double unity, male and female. At this point, something new then is brought into the story of creation. Man, Ha-Adam, falls asleep and awakens as male and female, in Hebrew, Ish and Isha. Prior to this, we have no mention of male and female, just Ha-Adam. Humanity now equals male and female. A new relationship is established. There is a second I. I is in capital I. Torpor signifies that humanity can no longer be thought of without male and female. This double unity, the two incarnations of being human, also highlight that shared humanity is necessary for our self-recognition. Adam only comes home to himself in the otherness of Eve. Adam was, or Ha-Adam, was alone with the animals. And this gives us an enduring principle. There is no I without you. I would never recognize my unique self if there were not a you. The other person reveals our subjectivity. Torpor emphasizes that humankind is male and female, and it knows itself through this dynamic. Now, it's important to make clear that the rib that is taken from Adam's side does not emphasize that the masculine is the real basis of humanity. Rather, it highlights that male and female are ontologically united. So they're united at their very core, their very being. She is flesh from my flesh, bone from my bones. When Adam sees Eve, an encounter of the second I, he marvels at her beautiful difference and is filled with joy. While JP2 highlights the use of the term rib, Ratzinger insists that the correct term is side. Adam is truly corporate and not just a single name or person. For from his side, Eve, oh, did I pass by? No, this is it. Oh, God, I was doing so well. Anyway, okay, we're proud. For from his side, Eve, a new mankind is formed. Woman is taken from the side of man, an inimitable expression of their perpetual dependence on each other and their unity in the one humanity. I think side, as the proper translation, does not take away from JP2's point, but actually elevates it. Woman is not, so to speak, a piece of man, but is from his very side. Man and woman are partners side by side. Unity denotes the identity of human nature. Duality denotes masculinity and femininity. These fit together. This conclusion is made, I think, really clear in a theological sense when we turn to Christ. Christ, let me get this up there. There we go. Christ, as the Son of the Father, and Son as the Word made flesh, reveal that unity permits difference. Or, more accurately, difference is necessary for unity. The Son is not the Father, nor is he the Holy Spirit. There are three persons, but one being. Their unity is not despite their threeness, but because of it. It is a perfect unity, a unity of freedom and love. The Incarnation likewise reveals difference as unity. Jesus Christ is fully God and fully man. He's not a demigod. He's not a man divinely inspired. He's not God in a fleshly costume. He's fully God and fully man. And yet we refer to him in the singular. He speaks with an I and not a we. In other words, he's not split personality. Difference and perfect unity. That's what we see. Do you perhaps hear the echo with marriage? The two shall become one. This gives a bit of perspective about what's happening. Okay. Communion of persons. God did not create man abandoning him alone, for from the beginning, male and female, he created them. And their union constitutes the first form of the communion of persons, communio personarum. While only Genesis 1 speaks of being made in God's image, Genesis 2 completes the definition. We can deduce that man became the image of God not only through his own humanity, but also through the communion of persons, which man and woman formed from the very beginning. Man is a being in relation, a communio personarum. What communio highlights is existence of the person for the person. One of the significant features of Christianity is that it distinguishes between the sexes, a distinction that's not absolute. It's a shared humanity. And these differences relate to their being persons. Again, I always tell the students, it's not the whole, you hear the men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? It's like, no. So JP2 is really clear. We speak about the other sex. Yeah, I think it's a better way of saying it, rather than even the different sex, the other sex. So, this is a great quote. A man or a woman is not only a mode of being sexed, but above all, a mode of being personal. Insofar as they are persons, men and women have the same absolute dignity because they're infinitely loved by God, who created them so as to be loved by them in return. Thus, the difference between men and women depends on their vocation to love. Note that our dignity is not based on our sex, but on our personhood. Personhood concerns relationship. Now, what does he mean by the vocation to love? Well, the author continues on. Man and woman were created to love one another as husband and wife, giving rise to the human family. The love between a man and a woman, therefore, leads to the union of the two different ways of being a person, whereby sexual desire, becoming eros, allows them to share in the mutual communion that distinguishes the Trinity, in the form of the gift of self to the other, a gift that can generate life. What Mallow and JP2 both highlight is that sexuality is not to be understood simply in a naturalistic term, or a naturalistic way. Rather, it is to be understood in terms of relations. Genesis 2:18 states, "It's not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper, fit for him." Oops. Well, I was ahead of myself, but maybe you read that. So with the term help or helper, we see that there is reciprocity, a type of reciprocity that no other being could offer. No other animal in the garden could enter into a reciprocal relationship with Adam. Okay, now coming back again to communio personarum. In original unity, man recognizes that he is a being in communion. And JP2 writes, man becomes an image of God, not so much in the moment of solitude as in the moment of communion. He is, in fact, from the beginning, not only an image in which the solitude of one person who rules the world mirrors itself, but also, and essentially, the image of an inscrutable divine communion of persons. Communio personarum is revealed through the body, male and female. We're not spirits. When Adam sees Eve, he sees her, physical. He says that she is flesh of my flesh and bone from my bones. The body reveals the human person. In seeing Eve, Adam recognizes himself, and at the same time, an other. She is different. He is drawn to her. She is not him. Femininity, in some way, finds itself before masculinity, while masculinity confirms itself through femininity. The enrichment for man, given in the masculine and feminine element, speaks theologically about the history of salvation. Salvation history is incomprehensible without the conjugal marital relation. Think how over and over again God's relationship with Israel in the Old Testament is likened to marriage. And then how this is taken up by St. Paul to speak about the church. Marriage is the primordial sacrament. You can ask questions about that later. And it must stand at the beginning of all things, for it is marriage that makes present, that makes understandable the unity of love, the love of Christ for his church. The unity of two become one is expressed in the conjugal act. I mean conjugal act, if you don't know what that means, the act of sex. And this allows man and woman to place their whole humanity under the blessing of fruitfulness. Through the conjugal act, man and woman enter into the privilege of procreation, a mystery that includes the physical, biology, but goes beyond it because it concerns existence. In a mysterious way, man and woman, via the conjugal act, connect to the mystery of creation itself. So, it's always worthwhile to turn to the Oxford Don C.S. Lewis. He writes the following. We must recognize that we have here to do with what I called the pagan sacrament in sex. In friendship, as we noticed, each participant stands for precisely himself, the contingent individual he is. But in the act of love, we are not merely ourselves. We are also representatives. It is here no impoverishment, but an enrichment to be aware that forces older and less personal than we work through us. In us, all the masculinity and femininity of the world, all that is assailant and responsive, are momentarily focused. The man does play the sky father, and the woman the earth mother. He does play form, and she matter. But we must give full value to the word play. Of course, neither plays a part in the sense of being a hypocrite, but each plays a part or a role in something which is comparable to a mystery play or a ritual at one extreme, and to a mask or even a charade at the other. Now, note the line, forces older and less personal than we work through us. These forces are natural. Man is naturally, in most cases, drawn to woman, and vice versa. And this is the work of nature. Lewis goes further. He says that we play a part, likening it to a charade. And this connects with what JP2 refers to as existence. That is, as persons, we choose to enter into this drama that, on one hand, is bigger than ourselves, namely the continuation of the species. And we take off that which makes us unique, our clothes. Lewis writes, by nudity the lovers cease to be solely John and Mary. The universal he and she are emphasized. You could almost say that they put on nakedness as a ceremonial robe or as the costume for a charade. On the other hand, we're more than this, for as persons, each one of us stand in an eternal relation with the Creator. In the conjugal act, each person is simultaneously himself and herself, and yet participates in the archetypes of male and female. The marital act is an entry into creation itself. The husband becomes Adam, the wife, Eve. One other interesting point to ponder in this paragraph is that in the sexual act, man repeatedly surpasses the limits of his solitude. Here in a particular act, man manifests the communio personarum, the relational person. No wonder sex is somewhat paradisical, for the marital act brings us back to some degree to that state of pre-fallen original unity. The conjugal act, in its proper context, is a type of realization of what we are and what we were made to be. Difference united, communio personarum.
And for dramatic effect, I'm going to read that again. The conjugal act, in its proper context, is a type of realization of what we are and what we were made to be. Difference united. Communio personarum. You're just going to walk out of here tonight with 2 words in your mouth, right? Communio personarum. I guess it's okay. Okay, so one of the other interesting points, oh no, I've already done that, let me go. Okay, now I've emphasized the universal and the archetypal, trying to hold it together with the personal. Let me now emphasize the personal, namely that choice is involved in the unity of man and woman. Genesis 2:24 states, "A man will leave his father and his mother and unite with his wife." The leaving highlights that man steps out beyond the bonds of natural community and by choice, self-determination, creates a new community with his wife. The body, male and female, helps with this choice in a natural sense. Call this the sex drive. There's a natural drawing together. But the union is only true when it is self-determined. If it's not self-determined, it's not an act committed by persons. I'll come back to that. JP2 posits the choice is what establishes the conjugal covenant between the persons who become one flesh only based on this choice. Thus, marriage is not simply the resolution of the longing of the flesh, but is personal. It exists in the realm of choice. JP2 writes, "This union carries within itself a particular awareness of the meaning of that body and the reciprocal self-gift of the persons. The conjugal act carries within it the unitive meaning of the body in its masculinity and femininity, but it needs to be recognized by the subjects so that it is a self-gift. In the conjugal act, husband and wife are brought together, are united in their personhood. But this is not the case if this is simply driven by the sexual instinct. Each must take up the natural desire and then choose to give the self to the other. The natural must be personalized, which is a great sort of principle to think theologically. The personal and the physical need to work together so that conjugality is a personal act of the subject. If this occurs, the act is unitive. If it does not occur, sex is an animal act committed between 2 trousered apes, to steal an image from C.S. Lewis. Okay, this is the last section of the paper, so I hope you're surviving. Is it warm in here? Yeah. It's just because I'm talking about sex. I wanted to have all these jokes for tonight. It's really hard to find clean jokes. Like you look up Adam and Eve jokes, right? It's like, yeah, that's not. There were some that were really funny, but I can't. Okay, the spousal meaning of the body. The complementary relation of male and female allows man and woman to be a gift for and to each other. This is the spousal meaning of the body. To understand the spousal meaning of the body, we need to turn to the notion of gift. That's part and parcel of creation. In Genesis, God is primarily portrayed as creator, and what he creates, he declares as good. What is good always comes out of love. Or, in JP2's language, only love, in fact, gives rise to the good and is well pleased with the good. We can parse this in several ways, but most importantly, or actually let's just say most simply, God is love. Not simply the object of our love, but he is a lover. Creation is the overflow of the superfluous love of God. Now, to be clear, God was not forced to create. He freely chose to create. And thus we can say that creation is a gift. Furthermore, all creation reflects God. and therefore reflects gift, especially us as humans. I mean, think of the beautiful passage in the Psalms. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes forth like a bridegroom leaving his chamber. Another nuptial image there. And like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hid from its heat. St. Paul runs with this and claims that by looking at the world, we can see something of God, and thus we're without excuse in terms of belief in God. He writes, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Ever since the creation of the world, his invisible nature, namely his eternal power and deity, has been clearly perceived in the things that are being made. So they are without excuse, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, or birds, or animals, or reptiles." Like the rest of creation, the body speaks the language of God. It is logos-like. God reveals himself both directly in revelation in the person of Jesus Christ and indirectly. Grace precedes nature. All nature is graced. And the creature, as John Milbank notes, as creature, is not the recipient of a gift. It is itself this gift. So you are all gifts. And that's why when we give ourselves away, it feels right? We're moving with the grain of reality. It feels so good. Unfortunately, we don't tend to do it all that often. But that's the heart of what we are. We are gift, imaging the Father who endlessly gives himself to us. Continuing with the notion of gift, gifts indicate something about both the giver and the receiver. The giver gives gifts that reflect something of himself. So, for example, if you love books, like myself, most likely you are not going to give someone a DVD of Lord of the Rings. Don't do it. You give them the book, right? By Tolkien himself, on paper, he'd be so appalled that his books were made into a film. And so is C.S. Lewis. Oh, all the Narnia films, they're so bad. Okay, anyway. The Lord of the Rings is good if you've never read the books. I'll go that far. Someone wants to fight. But anyway, okay. Gifts reflect the giver. Now, looking at the receiving aspect of a gift, if I told you that I bought a theology book for someone in my immediate family, okay, so a theology book, like, I don't have it with me, but John Paul II's TOB, you'd quickly guess that this was a present for my wife and not my 5-year-old daughter Elizabeth, right? Unless she's going to use it to hit her siblings with, right? We give gifts that fit the receiver. I don't give my kids cigars for their birthdays, nor would I give my alcoholic friend a bottle of bourbon. Even more basic, only a person can understand a gift. Have you ever given a pet a gift? It doesn't go over very well. Was the pet grateful? Certainly not if it's a cat, right? Have you ever given your computer a gift? The reception of a gift as a gift takes a certain level of understanding, a notion of meaning. Even on the level of persons, this is the case. We come to realize what gifts really are. So I think about, I have 6 kids, And every year we have a whole lot of birthdays. We have birthday month. We have 7 days with 3 birthdays. Okay. And have you ever read Berenstain Bears, Too Much Birthday? Yeah, it's way too much birthday. I put on about 10 pounds in a week, and it's awful. And we give the kids gifts, right? And the first couple of years, they have no idea, right? You ever give a 1-year-old a gift? You force them to open it, and then they think they should be excited because they see that you're excited, right? It doesn't mean anything. And then I think sometimes, maybe we did this with the kids down the line, we just recycled gifts because we didn't really notice anyway. But later, what's going to happen, right? They'll go back and they'll see pictures. Hopefully they don't realize they're recycled gifts. And they'll realize that they were loved, right? They'll recognize that there were gifts. But at the time they couldn't. They weren't grown enough in their personhood. Okay, so only persons understand gifts. And that means there's something intrinsic about personhood and giving and receiving. Again, as I said, you are gift. At the deepest level, man can recognize that his contingency, so I depend on another, none of us are truly autonomous, and his very being, okay, so I'm made from God, my being's, I subsist in God, he holds me together, is made, and I realize that I, totally dependent on God, am made from nothing. Creatio ex nihilo. Again, turning to the psalmist, great passage. For thou, I got the really sort of King James sounding one, but King James is great. If you like Shakespeare and all that. For thou didst form my inward parts. You ever use the word didst? It's just weird. Anyway, for thou didst form my inward parts. Thou didst knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise thee, for thou art fearful and wonderful. Wonderful are thy works. Thou knowest me right well. My frame was not hidden from thee when I was being made in secret, intricately wrought in the depths of the earth. Thy eyes beheld my unformed substance. In thy book are written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me. And as the psalmist, there it was. With a great icon, by the way. Anyway, just found that one today. Okay, sorry about that. And as the psalmist makes clear, there's only one proper response to gift: thanksgiving. Okay? We have that weird phrase, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? Because you can tell a bad horse by its teeth. Anyway, right? Because that's just it's weird, right? When someone gives you something, you should be thankful. And you see this in the Psalms. I praise thee, for thou art fearful and wonderful. Wonderful are thy works. Not only is man unique in that he can understand the gift, but also in that only he and she can respond to the gift. Furthermore, not only does man recognize the gift of his own being, but he can recognize that every creation bears within itself the sign of the original and fundamental gift. To add to this, we can receive and recognize the gift of the other human person. The husband is a gift to the wife, and the wife is a gift to the husband. This reciprocal aspect was missing in Ha-Adam's original state of solitude. There was no one to respond to him, and thus he did not live the world as a gift in the fullest sense. He was alone and desired a helper. Certainly, the essence of gift highlights that man cannot realize his essence without existing with and for someone. Communio personarum. This reciprocity is beatifying. The nuptial gift brings joy and happiness. Okay, and now I'm going to conclude. Man is a creature of original unity. That is, man is male and female. The differences highlight that the human person is one who finds himself by being in relation, communio personarum. This coming together is a primordial sacrament that reveals reality at its deepest. Love and relation are the foundation of reality. In marriage, we relive the metaphysic of creation. We participate in the creation story, revealing that reality is good, that it is relational. The differences between the sexes, male and female, enable us to be gifts all the way down to our bodies. The conjugal act, sex, is, in its proper setting, gift. And it thereby participates and reflects not only creation, but God himself. So, let me conclude with a good one-liner. Well, I have more to say, but sort of conclude with a one-liner. Sex is not a right, but a relation. This applies to sex as a noun. Male and female are realities of relation that reflect the deepest of realities. God is relation, and God is love. Our sex is not a right, and thereby a claim about something I deserve, but is a relation that involves others. Secondly, too far, hang on. Come back. Sorry, I like to make noises when these things move. One more. Sex is not a right, but a relation in terms of sex as a verb. Sex is symbolic of the unity of difference, of otherness, and the gifting of one's uniqueness to the other. It's not a pleasant pastime that all should have access to. Furthermore, sex is not something to be demanded by a spouse. At the same time, it's not something to be lorded over a spouse by withholding. Sex is a relation, a gifting of the self in total and utter commitment, big word, and love. The conjugal act is a relational act that is iconic of Trinitarian love and is a revealing of what it means to be a person. So, always good to end with a little poetry. So let me give you a little reading here. Do we have any Irish? Oh yeah, right? Northern Irish? Micheál O'Shiel. I know it looks different, but that's how you say it with Irishness. Okay, the poem is called Relative Antecedent. And you got to bear that in mind when you read it, okay? Because this is when it says, the first line here is talking about relative antecedent. A mouthful generations learned in class. Nouns, who, whose, which, or that stand for. Words so close, they're each other's alias. Two subjects of clauses in full rapport. Bond both relative and unrelated. Two parts that both blend and keep a selfhood. Kinship both embedded and complicated. Where water's every drop as thick as blood. One who unknowingly I journey to. One for whom it seems my being was meant. One whose time and mine together unfold. One that I speak of now, of course, is you, my only relative antecedent. One whom I promise still to hold. Still to love and hold. Thank you.